let's talk about how to work with publishers as a freelance book editor, including how to get your foot in the door, what to expect with publishing rates, what the work is like and how it differs from working with indie authors, and so much more. Hi, if you don't know me, my name is Molly. I've been a freelance book editor for a little over a decade now. I love sharing my tips with aspiring book editors, and also I love to talk about self-editing with indie authors. So I do occasionally share my advice here on YouTube, and I also like to do little day in the life of a book editor vlogs if that's kind of what you're into. And I share a little bit of my reading life, so you'll see book lists, book reviews, and that sort of thing. So if that resonates with you, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below and let me know a little bit about yourself because I would love to have a conversation. Now, before we jump into working with publishers as a freelance editor, I want to give a little disclaimer that the publishing industry as a whole is very difficult to break into. And I don't say that to discourage people. I say it as a way to just acknowledge the privilege and all the many different factors that go into landing a job in publishing. It's one of the reasons why I decided to pursue a career in freelance editing instead of, full-time position at a publisher. That said, I have worked as an editor for a traditional publishing house, not in a freelance capacity. And I have freelanced with big five publishers, but being able to go freelance was the right move for me, and it might be the right move for you too. So yeah, the disclaimer is that these tips are all based on my own experiences, and there are lots of different ways, lots of different paths to choose to find your editing journey with publishers. Other people are going to go about this differently, and that's okay. But I hope that my advice will, spark something for you in your editing journey to expand or grow your business. And that you'll be able to open a door or crack a window maybe and start working with publishers. My other note is that working with publishers is just one avenue of growing your freelance editing business. I actually don't recommend just working with publishers if you're trying to grow an editing business full time. And there are a few reasons for that. One, I think it's always smart to diversify the type of editing that you provide. But also, publishers are pretty unpredictable. They can be. Usually, it's quick turnaround times because they have pretty intense publishing schedules and deadlines that they have to meet. Also, notoriously not the best pay for editing. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think people can kind of romanticize working with publishers. And in my opinion, I don't think freelance editors should put all of their eggs in the publisher basket. They're probably the least flexible of my editing clients. I have my reasons for working with publishers, but I did want to say that there are some downsides to working with publishers. Also, you tend to get kind of boxed in with one type of editing or one genre. So, if you are looking to grow an editing business, you really want to diversify the type of editing that you're providing people. It's good for your wallet. It's good for your brain. You get a little brain breaks in between, editing fiction. You can edit articles. You want to mix it up a little bit. Put some variety in your work with indie authors, work with publishers, work with editorial agencies, work with businesses. But okay, that is a conversation for another video. This is the longest intro ever. I'm so sorry. Let's get into it. Number one, how to get work with publishers. How do you get your foot in the door? This is such a hard question. For me, this looked like networking and pretty much getting my foot in the door by any means necessary. Cold emailing smaller imprints that are a part of a large publisher. That has been surprisingly really successful for me. Having a presence on social media, following publishers that you care about on LinkedIn, on social media, that has been really valuable as well. I would recommend following production editors, managing editors, editorial project managers, anyone that you can find on social media who works for the publisher that you're interested in. Don't just have a presence on social media. Make sure that you're creating profiles for every professional editing directory that you can, that is accessible to you. So this might mean the Editorial Freelancers Association or ACEs, the Society of Editing. You can also have access to different job postings through continued education opportunities. So for me, I pursued the University of Chicago Graham School's editing certificate. Highly recommend. I have a blog post, I'll link it down below. For anyone who's interested, all about my experience there and what that looks like. But after I got my certificate, I was added to an email for different job opportunities, and that has been fruitful too. But yeah, circling back, I cannot stress enough the importance of following publishing professionals on different platforms, not necessarily emailing them, but I have gotten work by just following the right person at the right time. And, you know, sometimes people will put a call out there on LinkedIn or on their social media about expanding their freelancer pool. And that is always the right time to send a DM and perform an editing test and see what happens. That said, don't wait until you see a job posting or a call for freelancers to contact someone. Especially if you're cold emailing different imprints, because you just never know when a publisher needs more freelancers, and they absolutely do add resumes to their freelancer pool if it's not the right time now, and they will dip back into that pool at a later time. I've gotten work before where a publisher has reached out a year after I emailed them, 6 months after I emailed them. So you kind of have to be patient. Follow newsletters, put yourself in their orbit, and make sure when you do reach out to publishers that you share your experiences and you provide references if that's possible. Make sure you let them know that you can provide editing samples or perform an editing test. That all will communicate to them that you are an experienced editor and that you are willing to do the hard work of, you know, demonstrating your editing style to see if you're the right fit. I already mentioned trying to follow production editors or managing editors, editorial project managers, anyone in that sort of editing space. But it can be sometimes difficult to know who to contact. So I would say try to find their contact information first. But also, I've gotten work before just by emailing a generic publicity email. I will say you most likely will not hear back if you email a general email address. But sometimes if you label it, you know, to the editing team or project editor, it will sometimes get to the right person, especially if they're looking for freelancers at that time. But yeah, just going back to putting your information on as many directories as possible, having that professional editing presence is really important. Publishers will sometimes search different databases and to find the type of editor that they're looking for. And so having a profile in different associations and editing groups is really key. I sometimes think name recognition alone can get your foot in the door with publishers. I know that's certainly the case with the University of Chicago Graham School. It's a really prestigious program, and a lot of publishers value having freelancers from that program. So make sure that, and this is a conversation for another time, but like all editors should pursue professional training. Just make sure that you're keeping up with that continued education and that you have a presence in those spaces. Now, once you're in good standing with publishers, then you can kind of, like, once you've taken on a few projects and you've demonstrated that you're good at your job, then you can ask them if they would be willing to share your contact information with other production editors at other imprints. So a lot of the time, large publishers will have smaller imprints and they all have their different freelance pools. So being able to ask a production editor to share your information means that you can jump from imprint to imprint and just continue your experience that way. Another way to work with publishers, especially if you haven't before, is to ask other editors in your network. If you met editors through your continued education classes or different associations that you've joined, Ask editors, ask your instructors if they have publishing contacts. That is definitely going to benefit you expanding your editor network, especially if you've never worked with publishers before. Referral work is huge in the publishing industry. Most people do not want to pass along names of editors that they've never worked with or they can't vouch for their editing skills. So if you have editors from your school or your training or instructors who have seen your editing work, have seen you kind of grow as an editor, that is going to be massive for you. Okay, next, I want to talk about nurturing the editor-publisher relationship. So for the most part, when you're a freelance editor, sometimes it can feel a little bit transactional. With indie authors, it can feel transactional in that you're, working with them on one stage of the editorial process, and then you may never hear from them again. With publishers, you are most likely working with the production editor or the managing editor or the project manager, and you likely will never communicate with the author directly. So nurturing the relationship with the production editor is really important. And most of the time, they will reach out with opportunities, with projects that they think you would be a good fit for. And they don't expect you to take on every project they send. But once you've done one project and then you've done two and then you've done three and you've kind of demonstrated your editing skill, they will be faster with sending you work. I do recommend to nurture that relationship being as communicative as possible. You need to respond very quickly. If they don't hear from you about a project, they will assign it to another freelancer. So you want to be consistent, you want to be professional, you want to be really fast in your communication. You also just want to stay relevant. So as a little aside, I try not to fill my schedule with publisher work necessarily because the pay is just not as good. But I do try to stay relevant and top of mind for a lot of the production editors that I work with. So I try to take on a project like every other month at least. As it fits into my schedule and makes sense for me. So, you don't have to say yes to every project that comes your way, but just know that if you do pass on it, you might not get another email for a while. So you also need to be patient. If you've reached out to a publisher and they're interested in having you freelance, it may take a few months before they reach out to you with an actual project. And that is just the nature of the game. You also want to keep the line of communication open during your editing project. So if you have any questions at all, you should email the production editor. Now, there are certain things that you should query, but if it's like a global edit that you're not sure about, or something in the project feels off to you, or maybe something in the style sheet is not clear, always err on the side of curiosity and ask the production editor. They would rather know about it now than when they get your work. Being open with your communication during a project also just communicates that you know what you're doing, that you take the project seriously, and it helps build trust. So let's talk about what it actually looks like to work with a publisher. So in the beginning, once you kind of get on their freelance roster, you will get an email with kind of like the basics of the project. So you might get an author and title, you might get the type of editing that's needed, you'll get an approximate word or page count, and you'll probably get a hard deadline as well. You should get a pay rate. Sometimes I've worked with publishers in the past that just want you to bill them based on an hourly rate, but usually you will get either a flat fee or an hourly rate up into a maximum. Sometimes you'll get a synopsis, not always. Sometimes you'll get like problem areas or things that the publisher really wants you to look out for in this specific edit or proofread. And you should always get like a start and due date. So if you take that project on, you will receive that project in your inbox on the start date. You'll want to make sure that everything is available to you, that you have access to the files, that the files don't look, like anything's missing. And I recommend right away reviewing the style sheet, reviewing, the different publishers have different house style guides. Most of them, I would say, abide by the Chicago Manual of Style, but there are usually other things that publishers want you to keep an eye on. Sometimes you'll have different versions of the text to, proofread against. Like if you have a proofread, you'll get the PDF version, but you might get the copy edited manuscript as well. Sometimes you get completed files from previous books if it's in a series. All of these kind of supplemental materials are there to help you. Some publishers also have tutorials on how they would like you to mark up a PDF or what type of edits and queries to make. That can be really helpful as well. Most publishers will set an hourly rate. Usually copy editing pays more than proofreading. Developmental editing pays more than copy editing. I'll include a link to the EFA rates page down below, which is kind of like an industry standard for different types of editing. Over the years, I've seen publishers pay like 30 to 40 an hour for copy editing, maybe like 25 to 38 for proofreading. It really depends on the publisher. Rush projects can be higher. Some publishers do like to give a range of pages per hour, and that's really just because they have assigned budgets for each stage of the publishing process. When you finish your work, you always want to send your manuscript, send your revised style sheet, send your invoice in one email on the day that it's due or before. I'm pretty sure if you miss a deadline, a publisher will not work with you again. I mean, that's why I'm absolutely insane about meeting deadlines. Like I am very, very high strung about meeting deadlines. I don't think I've ever missed a deadline for a publisher. I've definitely pushed back projects with indie authors who have more flexible schedules. There was one time I was supposed to take on a project with a publisher, but I got the stomach bug and it was like a rushed project, so there was just no way I could do it. So yeah, not very flexible. You really need to honor deadlines if you want to work with publishers. Every publisher has a different process for invoicing, so just follow that. I did want to make a note about pay with publishers. I know I've been a little snarky about pay with publishers, but I should note that publishers do pay less, and really the reality is that they take on a lot more of the admin work. So they format the manuscript for you. They work with the author for you. They handle all of the invoicing and payment. And the projects generally tend to be cleaner in my experience. So working on a project through a publisher, it might take you a little bit less time to get through the work. And so it kind of makes sense. Like when I work with an indie author, I charge more because I'm doing more of the admin work, because I'm cleaning up the manuscript, the formatting, because I'm handling the invoicing and that sort of thing. But I do have more flexibility and control as a freelancer working with indie authors. So that is something to consider. Also, when you work with a publisher, they have stylistic preferences that are really non-negotiable. I think you can make your case as an editor. If something isn't working, or if you need more clarity on something, certainly. But when you work with an indie author, they oftentimes, I feel like I'm spending more time educating the author on how to hone their craft and how to make everything consistent. So oftentimes I'm creating a style guide for them and helping them decide what their style preferences even are. And so it's nice when you work with a publisher because they have all of those rules and preferences laid out for you. But it does mean that, there's little wiggle room or negotiation there. Okay, I feel like I've just rambled on. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to do more videos on what it looks like to work with a publisher as a freelance editor. I also have tons of videos. Most of them are from like 8 years ago, so I look very different, but I have a lot of videos down below on freelance editing, how to become a freelance editor, what the different levels of editing are, what makes a good editor in my opinion. So make sure to check out those videos too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stick around for more editing and author videos, and I will talk to you soon.